At every family event, my daughter was the one scrubbing floors while her cousins unwrapped gifts. They called it tradition. I called it cruelty. I stayed quiet until the day they made her cry in front of everyone. That was the last time they'd ever see her as invisible. What they didn't know was that I had a plan. I will tell you everything that happened. Before then, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. We are on a journey to our first 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. The day started like any other family gathering, but the pit in my stomach told me this wouldn't be normal. I'm a single dad doing everything I can for Emma, my 9-year-old. Every hour I work, every dollar I save is for her, so she doesn't grow up feeling invisible the way I did. Today, we were heading to my parents' house for what they called a family celebration, but I knew better. Their love always came with strings and favorites. Driving up the long driveway, I glanced at the sprawling house, a grand mansion with polished marble steps and manicured lawns. It was the kind of place I'd never afford, with a luxury that felt miles away from our small apartment downtown. Emma sat quietly beside me, clutching her backpack, excitement mixing with nervousness in her eyes. My parents always favored my sister's kids. They called them the perfect grandchildren. Bright smiles, expensive clothes, all wrapped in the kind of affection I rarely saw directed at Emma. I hated it. Hated the way they looked past my daughter like she was invisible. I hated that feeling of powerlessness, that gnawing worry that Emma would grow up thinking she was less because of them. We stepped inside the house, and the familiar buzz of voices hit me. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the rustle of expensive fabrics. Emma's eyes lit up when she spotted her cousins. They were already being showered with gifts and attention. My heart tightened as I watched her try to join the group. She smiled shyly, but my mother called her over with a curt nod, handing her a rag instead of a welcome. "Emma, help me with these windows," my mother said without looking up. It wasn't a request. It was a command. My daughter's smile faltered. I saw it. Her disappointment, her confusion. She obeyed quietly, wiping glass as her cousins played with new toys and ran around the room, laughing. I clenched my jaw, swallowing my frustration. I wanted to say something, but words caught in my throat. The afternoon blurred into a series of small humiliations for Emma. She was sent to fetch drinks, clean up spills, or organize the endless piles of presents her cousins received. Meanwhile, my sister's children basked in the spotlight, their grandparents doting on them like royalty. They sat on laps, received compliments, and were promised expensive outings. Emma was just background noise, a shadow they ignored. I stayed close, making sure Emma didn't completely disappear. She tried to keep her head down, to be invisible, but I could see the pain behind her eyes. It was a pain I knew too well. The sting of being unwanted, of being overlooked by the people who should love you most. My parents never hid their preference. It was as clear as day, and it cut deep. Every time I glanced at my parents, I saw the satisfaction in their eyes as they fawned over my sister's kids. Their smiles were bright, their praise loud and generous. When Emma walked by with a bucket and mop, those smiles faded, replaced by cold indifference. It was a cruel, unspoken message. Emma didn't belong here. I felt my blood boil, but I held it in. For her sake, I couldn't lose control. I tried to engage my daughter in quiet conversations, reminding her that she was loved, that she mattered. But I knew my words weren't enough against years of neglect. The resentment bubbled inside me, mixing with shame. Shame that I couldn't protect her better. Shame that my parents treated her like a burden instead of a blessing. As the sun began to set, the party started winding down. The cousins were still showered with gifts and praise, while Emma sat on the edge of the room, exhausted and unnoticed. I wrapped an arm around her small shoulders, pulling her close. Her head rested against my chest, and I felt the weight of the day pressing down on us both. I looked around at the smiling faces, the false warmth, and I made a silent vow. This toxic pattern had to end. No matter what it took, I would fight to protect Emma from their cruelty. She deserved more than being the overlooked child, the one sent to clean while others were spoiled. I wouldn't let her grow up thinking she was less than the perfect grandchildren. The mask of family togetherness had slipped, revealing the cracks beneath. I was done pretending. This was just the beginning. The ride home was quiet. Emma stared out the window, her eyes blank, her lips pressed into a thin line. I watched her through the rearview mirror, searching for anything I could say to make it better. But the words caught in my throat again, just like they always did. We pulled into our parking spot behind our modest apartment, and she mumbled, "Can I go lie down?" I nodded, heart sinking. She shouldn't have to carry this weight at 9 years old. Later that night, I found her curled up with her blanket, facing the wall. I sat beside her on the bed, running a hand through her hair. "Emma, you didn't do anything wrong." She shrugged, voice muffled by the blanket. "I know. I just don't think Grandma likes me." Her words hit me like a punch. She wasn't imagining it. She saw it. She felt it. And I had let it happen. Guilt wrapped around me like barbed wire. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling and revisiting every moment where I should have stepped in. There was her 6th birthday, when my parents sent a generic card while throwing a backyard carnival for my sister's twins. Then Christmas, Emma got socks while the others got iPads. Every time we visited, she was either ignored or given little chores to help out. They called it being responsible. I called it cruel. And I had let it slide far too long. The next morning, I made her favorite breakfast, pancakes shaped like stars, but she barely touched them. Her spirit had dimmed a little more, and I hated them for it. I told her, quietly and firmly, "Things are going to change, sweetheart. I promise." She looked up at me with tired eyes. "You always say that." That broke me. That made it real. I had failed her, again and again. But this time, I wouldn't just say it. I'd do something. I started watching more carefully during family events. My phone became a quiet tool. I recorded audio snippets of conversations, took photos when Emma was left out, and saved texts that showed their two-faced behavior. My parents were polite to me in front of others, but I kept proof of how cold and dismissive they were behind closed doors. It wasn't just favoritism. It was calculated neglect. And I was done playing the quiet son. During a cookout, I overheard my aunt whispering to my mother, "You know, Emma doesn't really fit in. She's just not polished like the others." That was it. That was the mask slipping. I approached them with a drink in hand and smiled like I hadn't heard a word, but inside, something hardened. They didn't see Emma as family. They saw her as an embarrassment. Because we weren't rich. Because I was a single dad. Because we didn't fit their curated image. It became clearer as I spoke with extended relatives. My sister's husband worked in finance, wore Rolexes, drove Teslas. Their children were always photographed in designer clothes. My parents bragged about them constantly. Meanwhile, I worked in education tech, kept to myself, didn't have a flashy life. Emma wore second-hand clothes and loved library books more than gadgets. That was enough for them to brand us as unworthy. They were obsessed with appearances, image over integrity. The realization made me sick, but it also gave me clarity. I couldn't reason with people who measured love by brand names, but I could expose them. Quietly, smartly, with precision. I started organizing my evidence, texts, photos, videos, into folders on my drive. I spoke with others in the family, asking gentle questions that revealed the same pattern. Emma was treated like staff, like an obligation. They all saw it. But no one said anything. Until now. Every week, I added more pieces to the puzzle. I even created a private email where I stored backup files, just in case. I wasn't entirely sure what I'd do with it yet, but I knew it needed to be done. Emma wasn't just my daughter. She was my whole world. And I wasn't going to let these people dim her light any longer. My plan was forming. Slowly, deliberately. No angry confrontations. No shouting matches. Just quiet truth. Documented, undeniable. Let them pretend. Let them smile in public. Because soon, they'd be exposed not by words, but by their own actions. I would make sure the world saw them for who they really were. And they'd never see it coming. The next gathering was for my father's retirement party. A grand affair, held in a rented ballroom downtown. Crystal chandeliers hung over white linen tables. My sister's family arrived in designer outfits, soaking in admiration. Emma wore her best dress, blue with small embroidered stars, and clutched a book to calm her nerves. I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, today would be different. I wanted to believe it too. But deep down, I knew better. It started small. My mother pulled Emma aside to help with napkin folding while the other kids played with rented VR sets. Then, as guests arrived, my sister barked at her to pick up spilled chips from her son's plate. Emma did it without complaint. I stood frozen, lips pressed together. The last straw came when one of the cousins knocked over a glass of juice. Emma was ordered, in front of everyone, to grab a towel and scrub it off the floor. People watched. Some chuckled. My daughter looked humiliated. I clenched my fists, rage crawling up my spine. Emma looked at me, eyes wide, not crying, not pleading, just defeated. That was worse than tears. I walked over, helped her up, and quietly told her to wait outside. Then I marched straight to my parents, who were mingling near the head table. We need to talk. Now. My voice was low, tight, dangerous. My father raised an eyebrow, annoyed. My mother frowned. Can it wait? No, I said. It can't. We stepped into a side hallway. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. She's 9. You made her clean the floor in front of 40 people while the others laughed. My mother waved her hand dismissively. She's just helping. My father added, don't be dramatic. The other kids are more spirited. She's quiet, so we give her small tasks. I stared at them. You mean you humiliate her because she doesn't fit your idea of perfect? My mother's voice turned icy. If you can't raise her to be useful, don't blame us. That was it. My final tether snapped. I said nothing else, just turned and walked away. I felt powerless, furious, humiliated, but more than anything, I felt sharpened, like something inside me had shifted. I found Emma waiting outside, pretending not to cry. I hugged her tight. We're done with this, I said. We're never coming back. She didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded and got in the car. I looked back at the shining venue, the laughing crowd, the fake smiles. I would tear it all down. The next morning, I started digging. I already had plenty of recordings and photos, but now I wanted roots. The financial kind. I remembered my father's pension fund had taken a hit a few years ago, and there was a rumor in the family that my sister's husband had helped out. I started there. Public records, property taxes, business ownership filings, credit reports, late payments. What I found after 3 days nearly made me laugh. My sister's husband had taken out a risky loan under a shell company my father co-signed. It was all there. Loan documents, inflated appraisals, even a quietly settled lawsuit over misappropriated funds. They had kept it buried, protected by reputation and silence. But the foundation of their fake empire was rotten, and now I had proof. I compiled it all in a private dossier. The hypocrisy was nauseating. They looked down on me and Emma because we were modest, quiet, average. But behind their curtain of perfection, they were one bad move from collapse. And I was going to be that move. With the evidence in hand, I started planting seeds. I contacted a former colleague, now a freelance journalist, who had recently written a piece on white-collar fraud and family trusts. I didn't give names, just scenarios. She was intrigued. If you ever decide to go public, she said, let me know. People love a house of cards story. I told her I might. Soon. But first, I needed to prepare. Quietly. Carefully. With precision. This wouldn't be revenge through rage. It would be justice served cold. I looked at Emma that night as she read quietly on the couch, still distant, still wary of trusting peace. I kissed the top of her head and whispered, they won't hurt you again. Not ever. Because now, I had leverage. The kind they couldn't laugh off or call dramatic. I was done being the quiet son. They wanted a performance. I'd give them one they'd never forget. The kind that would shatter their little kingdom. And leave the stage lights burning long after the curtain fell. Revenge isn't loud. It's not fireworks and shouting matches. It's silence, measured, intentional, and cold. I didn't strike back with fists or fury. I used what they never saw coming. The network I built through quiet years of grinding work, respect earned in small, honest ways. I started small. A whispered word at a charity gala. A mention of irregularities during a golf game. I never said names. Just planted truths where they could bloom. Rumors are like smoke. Once they rise, people start looking for fire. The first shift came at a community fundraiser. My father had been asked to give a keynote speech. That morning, the event coordinator, a friend of a friend, called me. Is it true your dad co-signed that bad loan for a failed real estate flip? I didn't confirm it, just let silence stretch long enough for discomfort to take root. He was replaced on the speaker list. My father brushed it off publicly, but I saw his jaw tighten, the edge in his smile. The first crack in the facade. Next, I reached out to a client of my sister's husband, an accountant I'd worked with during a freelance data analysis job. I casually asked if they were aware of some of the shell companies behind their consultants' finances. By the end of the week, they had severed ties. Again, no fireworks, just emails, quiet withdrawals. The ground beneath them began to shift. They still hadn't noticed I was the one pulling the threads. That was the point. This wasn't about spectacle. It was about erosion. At home, Emma began to change. She didn't know the details, only that we didn't have to see them anymore, and that somehow, her father had found a way to protect her. She smiled more, laughed without looking around to check if it was okay. One evening, she came home from school and showed me a drawing she'd made. It was of us, just us, standing in front of a little house. She'd written underneath, "My dad is a shield." I nearly broke, but I didn't. I couldn't, not yet. I continued the slow unraveling. A former teacher of mine, now a blogger with a decent following, agreed to publish an anonymous exposé about favoritism in wealthy families, highlighting how overlooked children are left to carry invisible wounds. I supplied background. Nothing defamatory, nothing illegal. Just enough emotional truth to resonate. The blog went viral in our town. My parents' friends started sharing it, some recognizing the signs, others perhaps recognizing themselves. My family still didn't see my fingerprints. But the discomfort had arrived. The invitation stopped flowing. My sister's husband wasn't asked to speak at his alma mater's business panel. My mother's social circle began to shrink as whispers turned to side eyes at events. The pressure grew. And still, I said nothing. Emma and I lived quietly, our home a small haven. She began piano lessons again. We started cooking together. I watched her shoulders loosen, her laughter return. I was giving her something they never could: freedom from their judgment. That was the real revenge. But I wanted more than peace. I wanted justice. The next step came when I found a small error in one of my father's old tax filings, a discrepancy tied to charitable donations that didn't exist. I didn't report it. I simply mailed a copy of the form to someone I knew at the local paper, a friend of mine. She called me. "Is this what I think it is?" I said, "Let's just say it might be part of a bigger story." She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. The family began to spiral quietly. There were hushed arguments at events, canceled appearances. My sister, always polished, began showing up late and anxious. I watched from afar, still silent, still smiling. I attended events now with confidence, my name gaining slow recognition for my steady work and quiet competence. People began to ask, "How come we never heard more about you?" I'd shrug and say, "I was busy doing the work." Their reactions were always the same, a mix of admiration and curiosity. Emma never asked what was happening, but she knew. Kids are perceptive like that. One night, she looked up from her homework and said, "They don't bother us anymore." I nodded. "They can't." She smiled and went back to her math. That was the moment I realized I didn't need to scream for justice. I just needed to remove them from our lives and let the rot speak for itself. But I wasn't done. Not yet. There was one last domino to tip, one final event where the lights would be brightest. My parents were planning their 40th wedding anniversary. A grand affair, invites had gone out, a venue booked, catering secured. My sister had even managed to pull some favors to get a minor local celebrity to attend. But what they didn't know was that the journalist friend I'd been working with was preparing a feature piece, a spotlight on the myth of the perfect family. And it would go live the morning of the party, with names, verified documents, financial trails, legal risks, photos. I had delayed giving the final go-ahead. Until now. With everything in place, and my daughter finally smiling like she believed in her own worth, I made the call. My friend answered. "Are you sure?" she asked. I looked out the window, at the life we had reclaimed, and said, "Yes." They taught me to stay quiet. Now they can hear what silence becomes when it's had enough. I hung up. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. A storm was coming. And this time, they wouldn't see it pass. The room glittered under chandeliers, full of people in pearls and suits sipping wine as if their world hadn't already begun to rot. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary was set up like a coronation, lavish flowers, a slideshow of their legacy, their grandchildren paraded like trophies. Emma sat beside me in a navy blue dress, her hair pulled back, eyes dim with practiced silence. I watched her look longingly at the dessert table, where her cousins had already dug in. She knew better than to ask. That was about to change. I stood as the lights dimmed for the tribute video, my heart steady. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. Before we start, I said into the mic, I have a short message to share. A few truths, really. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother's smile froze. I plugged in my drive, replacing their slideshow with something much more honest. Surveillance photos of Emma cleaning, audio clips of whispered cruelty, screenshots of family chats where she was mocked and excluded. Gasps scattered like dropped glass. Emma is my daughter, I said. And for years, you all treated her like she was nothing, while her cousins were treated like royalty. You made her scrub your floors. You ignored her birthdays. You let her cry while you posted photos of the perfect family. Faces turned pale. My mother stood to stop me, but I raised a hand. Sit. You don't get to control this narrative anymore. I pulled up the blog post, now live, open on the screen. The world knows now. This isn't just a story, it's yours. People shifted in their seats. Whispers turned into murmurs. My sister's husband was already on his phone, his expression hollowing. He'd seen the email too, the one detailing the accounting inconsistencies, CC'd to his clients and contacts. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him, his jaw clenched, face drained. I didn't come for an apology, I said. I came for Emma. I turned to her, holding out my hand. She stood slowly. For a moment, the room was silent, watching the girl they'd treated like a ghost walk into the light. And then applause. Not everyone, but enough. A few neighbors stood. An old friend of my mother's nodded through tears. Someone whispered, "It's about time." The weight of decades cracked, and Emma squeezed my hand like she finally believed we mattered. My father tried to speak. "We didn't mean to," I cut him off. "Intentions don't erase wounds. Actions do." I walked away with Emma, not toward the door, but to the dessert table. She took a slice of cake. I took a breath. Let them taste what they'd served us for years. After that night, the unraveling accelerated. My sister's husband lost 2 major clients. My father was asked to resign from the homeowners board. My mother's book club quietly dissolved. There were no more family photo shoots. No brunches. No group texts. The silence became deafening for them. For us, it was peace. Emma returned to school a little taller, her teachers noting her confidence. She joined the art club. I found her singing to herself while doing homework, something I hadn't heard in years. That was my real victory. Still, it wasn't all triumph. Revenge never comes without blood. My brother, who tried to stay neutral, stopped speaking to me. A few relatives sent angry emails, called me a traitor. Others tried to apologize, but I didn't have the energy to sort genuine from performative. Emma didn't ask to visit them, and I didn't offer. We built something better. Not bigger, not richer, but honest. Safe. There was a cost to standing up, but the cost of staying silent had nearly broken her spirit. I chose the burn over the bruise. Late one night, Emma crawled into bed beside me, a habit from years ago I thought she'd outgrown. She didn't say anything, just rested her head on my chest. I wrapped an arm around her, listening to her breathe. "Do you think they ever loved me?" she asked quietly. I swallowed hard. "Maybe, but they didn't know how to show it in a way you deserved." She nodded slowly, curling closer. "You do." That was enough for me. The scars would remain. But at least now, they had stopped bleeding. I stood alone on our porch the next morning, watching the sunrise. The fallout had settled. The reckoning complete. I'd done what I set out to do. Not for revenge alone, but for healing. For truth. For Emma. I didn't regret exposing them. But I understood now why most people never do. It takes everything. It forces you to choose between peace and justice, and live with the silence that follows both. But I'd do it again. For her. 100 times. No family is worth saving if it means losing your child. As the sun rose higher, I saw Emma in the yard, watering a row of tiny plants she'd begged me to let her grow. She waved. I waved back. The air felt lighter, no longer poisoned by neglect, no longer filled with longing. Just life, quiet, real, and ours. I had buried the myth of the perfect family that day, and in its place, we planted something better. Something that didn't need approval, or applause, or appearances. Just love. That would have to be enough. And for once, it was. In the end, they lost the one thing they valued most, their reputation, while Emma gained something far more important. Dignity, peace, and a father who never stopped fighting for her. I didn't burn the family bridge. I just stopped pretending it ever led to anything worth crossing toward. And now, my daughter walks forward, proud, seen, and free. Like if you felt the pain. Subscribe for more gripping, emotional stories every week. Because some stories aren't just for entertainment, they're a wake-up call. See you soon in the next story.